Secretary Maureen, if you want to come to the stage, please.
Vai lá, Richard, então.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caio Penido. I'm the president of the Meat Institute of Mato Grosso. We are going to present our green passport. We have with us Richard, who is responsible for the partnership with IPAM, Richard Smith, and we have Maureen, the secretary representing the state of Mato Grosso, Maureen Lazarete, and we are going to show how to articulate with IMAP, and we are going to have Erich Masson from the from the Federal Prosecution Office. IMAC is comprised by these three pillars: the Mato Grosso state with its strategy, with Climate, the cattle raiser association, and Sindifrigo, that is the union of refrigerators. We have two counselors indicated by Acrimate, two from the refrigerator companies, and the president of the council is the Secretariat of Environment in Mato Grosso, SEDEC. So the idea is to promote Mato Grosso as a reliable provider of meat. So what is the objective? Is to open market, consolidating the market, adding value. That was the main objective of IMAC. But to do so, we also work with our image, information, research, and transparency. So in the beginning, we had the promotion of meat, working with the image, but when we went to the different fairs, food fairs, to talk about the production, to talk about the conservation, the tropical climate, we were always questioned on the environmental regulation, deforestation, traceability, and greenhouse gases emissions. So when I took over 3 years ago, I was in this first part in my farm, intensifying carbon research and so on. So I am a communicator. So I started promoting my image, but I also wanted to work with the two other work fronts, with the intensification and an improvement of greenhouse gases emissions, and also the environmental emissions. That is a bottleneck for any country with biodiversity. If you don't have biodiversity, it's not hard for you to regulate your property if you don't have to comply with the law in your farm concerning biodiversity. In the last COP at Glasgow, we were very much questioned about traceability. So this is our overall strategy to help us in the solutions and to access any market. What is the idea? To issue this green passport for the Mato Grosso products, so that with this passport you can enter any country in the world, any country that wants to buy meat, because we've been talking to the importer countries, especially China, and they told us that they want beef, they want um, they want the cattle. So the United States, Australia, Uruguay, Argentina, they are not able to produce so much. And they asked, are you able to produce this low carbon meat? Yes, we do. We have a good climate in Brazil and we are able to do so. and a meat that is guaranteeing the conservation of biodiversity according to the law. So we started talking to China, and we asked, is there a more sustainable meat than the one that we are presenting? And they answered back, no, we cannot find. So let's create this green passport to validate everything that we do in the state, everything that we are helping to do since uh, 2017. And let's tell you about this story and showing the next steps as well.
Engasguei aqui, só para dar uma olhada. Então, a grosso modo, o protocolo destinado à implantação.
So the protocol is dedicated to the social environmental traceability. Talking to Dr. Erich, he said that he already provides the audit to the slaughterhouses, and practically 80% of the slaughterhouses are already verified. And he says we should show that. We should give visibility and credibility to that audit. We should strengthen the reputation campaigns in the state in a partnership with the Public Prosecution Office. And the traceability is the filter to everything that we do, having as a pillar to this traceability the Forest Code, the Unified Protocol of the Prosecution Office, taking into consideration the market trends that are more concerned with the sustainability and the climate change. And in terms of intensification, that would also guarantee to us a younger meat that stimulates the reduction of the slaughter age and having as a collateral effect a tender meat. We standardize that in the Green Passport as a standard. So markets, environmental regulation, and we should get to that to 100% of the slaughterhouses that are verified. We want to issue that green passport to all meat that is slaughtered in Mato Grosso. In terms of conservation, we have our product meat. We want to prove that it's the most sustainable meat in the world. We want to add value to that. We want to stimulate the producers to produce more, improve their management, having more scale and earning more money. If the world does climate justice to our meat, they pay more to the meat that has sustainability. They should pay a premium for that. And another challenge is creating value in the forest. Today, the forest is a cost. There's a cost to Brazil in conserving the forest. The forest inside the properties, they generate a cost to the rural producer. There's a cost to the government of Mato Grosso, a cost to the federal government. It's difficult to supervise the properties, the public properties that are isolated in the Amazon. There's the whole cost that we have, and the bonus that is the environmental service that is provided, it's to the whole world. So we have the challenge of creating the value in this biodiversity, which is the carbon market, the market of environmental services. We have this whole challenge that cannot be analyzed. We cannot be penalized for conserving the forest. I talked about China. We have also talked to the European Union. We went to Brussels to discuss the European legislation on deforestation, and we noticed that they just want more. Now they wanted a vote of trust from Brazil, a vote of confidence to Brazil, so they want so they could support us, but we were the ones who wanted a vote of confidence, a vote of trust from them. And a country in a continental dimension, rich in biodiversity, took this challenge of implementing a forest code. This is our commitment. We are already showing what we want. And now I said, this is climate diplomacy. They say what they want, and now they have to listen. Europe created the Industrial Revolution. The global warming started after the Industrial Revolution. They disseminated the World War. They separated the world in colonies. They took this model of development to the colonies, including Brazil. And now we said that's enough. In Brazil, we want to reverse that. We want to be a protagonist in this debate. So if the world noticed that the climate is important and sustainability is important, Brazil is ahead and Mato Grosso is already working on it. Brazil is already doing this. And what do we want from Europe? And Europe said, what do you want? Do you want money? No, we don't want money. We don't want crumbs. We want money to do a partnership on a research project of carbon measurement, to do communication campaigns to explain to the cattle raisers the importance of the forest code, to raise awareness of the small slaughterhouses on a social environmental diagnosis, and we want a fair market. We just want climate justice for Brazil and for our agricultural commodities that conserve the biodiversity. We want a market that remunerates better those who have biodiversity and biodiversity as a new commodity. The initiatives of the public and private sectors in Mato Grosso that guide the macro environment. Yesterday, we launched the carbon neutral program in Mato Grosso, where the cattle raising has an important role. We had a speech yesterday about the conservation of the forest stock and the forest carbon that is located in the properties. It is our obligation by law conserving this neutral carbon. We have an important challenge of intensifying and fixating the carbon in the soil. I think the cattle raising has a very relevant role in the government plan. The strategy producing, conserving, and including, the PCS strategy. At the end, everything is summarized to producing, conserving, and including, producing sustainably, conserving, following the Brazilian legislation, and including is a point that we discussed with the European Union, an European legislation that overlaps the Brazilian legislation. They want to dictate the rules. The great strategists of sustainability in the world that now have a lot of problems. They want to impose a legislation that overlaps the most conservationist legislation in the world. That is a little bit strange in their environmental part. They say they understand, but let's leave it for later. But social inclusion, they understand very well because they subsidize those small producers. Keeping that small producer in the field is very important for maintaining culture, so that part they understand, and we were able to change the European legislation to look at that small producer that is more vulnerable, and we can create a legislation that is zero deforestation. That small producer can simply be excluded from the chain, and if they are excluded, they are out of the umbrella of the slaughterhouses, and they can go to the informal market. I think these are the main ones. And we are also within the initiatives of the big fridges, which are JBS, Frigo. They are the ones that are pressured, and they are looking for searching those problems. So they are in compliance with the Green Passport initiative. This is an overview. Now Bruno's going to talk about it, our Director of Operations. We started with the appreciation of the meat in Mato Grosso, carbon intensification, typification of carcass. Bruno's going to describe this part. Good afternoon, everyone. As Caio said, my name is Bruno. I am the Technical Operational Director of IMAC. The strategy that we designed for the Green Passport was dividing it into two work streams. These two work streams are convergent and they are concomitant. Work stream number 1 was started to appreciate Mato Grosso's meat. We understand that complying with the forest code and following all of the criteria included in the Unified Protocol of the Public Prosecution's Office may not guarantee to the producer a bonification or a premium for what they are doing in their property. So we use the classification and typification of carcasses to offer the producer a possibility of a better remuneration. And our experience comes from what we are seeing in our commercialization of meat in the Chinese market. The second front, which is what is going to guarantee our social environmental traceability, has several pillars, which is following the Forest Code, the criteria of the protocol from the Public Prosecution's Office, and using the programs that are already under execution by IMAC, the program of reinsertion and monitoring, the electronic protocol of the meat, and the car map, where IMAC is a partner of the Instituto Ação Verde, and gathering all of those actions that we are already executing and putting it under an umbrella called Green Passport is what we are trying to carry out in the next few years. And this traceability that we are offering in the work stream number 2 joins not only the direct providers, but with the discussion with the producers, we are going to include the indirect suppliers, including the rural properties and the fridges, the slaughterhouses. In the work stream number 1, where we talk about the Mato Grosso meat, we saw the following opportunities and possibilities. We know that the state of Mato Grosso has the biggest cattle herd in Brazil, slaughtering almost 7.7 million animals. Our cattle in Mato Grosso can feed almost 25 million people, almost 8 times the population of Mato Grosso. However, we can improve a lot. The pasture areas are around 28 million hectares, have a high degree of degradation, and we can offer technologies and incentivize the producers to have more intensified productions. Some aspects related to our cattle raising and showing how complex can be this protocol of the green protocol, the green passport. 54% of the properties in Mato Grosso have a average herd of 59 animals. So this is very rich cattle rising. And within our green passport, we need to build an inclusive process that gives opportunity to this cattle raiser to regularize themselves. We have around 22 million animals in farms, 10.6 million animals in raising farms. And some other information that are important about the state. We have an area dedicated to protecting and preservation of 65%. The area of food production occupies 34.9% of the total area of the state. So we can gather conservation and food production in a territory that is very large, and we use only a small part to produce fibers and food for the whole population. And what we would like to show you in terms of lessons learned in the last few years related to promoting the intensification in cattle raising, here you can see in this chart animals with over 36 months in red animals slaughtered from 26 to 36 months in green, and animals slaughtered up to 24 months in blue. The China effect in Brazil, buying animals up to 32 months age, made us go to 37% of animals up to 24 months of age. An animal that is slaughtered younger has better genetics, was better fed, and was better handled, went through a treatment of animal welfare. That animal is more sustainable for us than animals who are slaughtered older. And that is a kind of technology that we have to foster in the state of Mato Grosso so that we can bring those animal raisers inside the Green Passport project. Those animal raisers are going to directly contribute to sustainability in the livestock of the state. If we're being more productive, the cattle raisers don't have to worry about acquiring more areas. Those producers are going to be better remunerated.
Eles estão reunidos no Observatório da Carne, que é mais uma das
So
atividades.
all these studies are in the Observatory of Meat. One of the activities we've implemented to better communicate about what is produced in the state of Mato Grosso concerning beef. And we also have information on sanitation from the Geographic and Statistics Institute and from conservative units, where we are able to explore all the potential in order to advance in this front of adding value to the meat in the state of Mato Grosso. As I've commented before, this first work stream has an objective of creating value so that we can add the most producers and identify the producers within the platform. We also have a way to work with the mechanisms for environmental service payment that we will develop with IPAM, and Caio is going to explain about that. It's a commercial action with a climate impact, right? This China impact. So what we talk about concerning intensifying the improvement of the degraded pastures and so on, we have to agree that with the partner. If it's a producer, it's not an heir that is waiting to sell. If they have access to credit, they're going to hire this consultancy, this technical assistance to better sell the meat for China. So they're going to have a best results. And that's the type of solutions we need. We don't want sanctions. We want to recognize Brazil for complying with the forest code. And Europe is going to develop the risk classification on deforestation for different countries. If you don't have any forest, you don't have the risk of deforestation, right? If you've conserved your forest, we have 66% of our territory destined to conservation. So the risk is very high. Because it's an opportunity for people to get richer invading the public lands. It's an invasion of public lands. So they are stealing from Brazilians in general. So we must fight that. But the legal deforestation should be allowed because we have laws for that. And we should economic mechanisms to regulate that. That was an example given by Bruno. And the second work stream, which is a simultaneous one, is on environmental regulation. This is an action we developed at the end of last year concerning the mapping basis. Just for you to understand, if you're from the legal Amazon, you know about that. but we didn't have the single map unit. The environmental engineer was observing on map basis, and the other from the secretariat was using another map. So this process was taking years because the process went from one to the other, and Maureen was starting this dialogue with other associations because one of the main bottlenecks for the state was this one. So we had the initial leadership of ProSoja and then AMPA with cotton, and I've mentioned wood, and we had this partnership to have this rural register map that we call Mapa do Car in Portuguese. We have access to the images and we were able to organize. And this is to make it faster to regulate the lands, right? In a more pragmatic way. So these are the next steps that we are developing with Maureen. We can align the productive sector, the industries, the public prosecution office, and civil society. I'm going to give the floor to Secretary Maureen because she's going to talk about that in a better way. Thank you, Caio. Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Erich, Dr. Christian, Richard, I'm sorry, from IPAM. It's a pleasure to be here. I will go back to the rural register to explain why the government of Mato Grosso had to ask the support of the productive sector to change the legislation in the state. Although uh, we have the best rural register implementation, it was in Brazil, it was far from the ideal. After investing a lot in the analysis of the rural register, we came to the results that most of the analysis ended up being unfruitful in terms of the validation of information due to the low quality of what was sent to the environmental body. And we had many differences between the database and the technical project that was inserted in the system. And one of the bottlenecks was the hydrography. We had almost 90% of the register reproved due to the hydrography. And we also noticed that all the pictures presented were not according to the standard. So the rural register map was a strategy to support the productive sector in elaborating the register and also putting together data to elaborate the project. After 1 year of project, we are able to notice this enhancement in terms of the rural register validation, and we've, we are celebrating the 10 years of the forest code implementation, and we had the best results in our rural registers. But we are far from achieving the objective, which is having the rural properties in the state of Mato Grosso and Brazil totally regulated with the regulation programs established. And what's new, what's coming for the next year is the identification with this analysis pipeline. And we are going to have this simplified analysis. We are going to compare different registers with the standards, and those with no divergence with the environmental standards can go on and in a simplified register. So we've analyzed more than 50% of the registers within the environmental body, and 5% of the registers were validated. But this is far from finishing the backlog. So we are simplifying the analysis, we are removing the less complex registers, and we are going to enhance the validation, the car validation, overcoming one of the challenges that is in fact to promote the environmental regulation for all producers. And of course, the small ones face many barriers. The idea that we are developing with the federal persecution is to add efforts with the rural producers so that we can reach the objectives to have the environmental regulation and sustainability of products in Mato Grosso so that it can become a virtual cycle collaborating with the image of the state. We must show and and show that for those who are purchasing the products. Thank you, Maureen. I'm going to say a few words and then I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Erich. This is the message. This is good, but it could improve. And we have this communication challenge because the cattle raiser is sometimes in isolated areas. We are in the most productive regions, but sometimes Bruno goes to the countryside and people are not aware about CAR, about the different deadlines. So there's this challenge in terms of communication. Here it's another project that is working, which is PRAM, the Reinsertion and Monitoring Program. And I wanted to reinforce how joyful it is to work with partners such as Maureen and Erich and public institutions. We want to solve the problems. We don't want to waste time. And sometimes we go to the public bodies and we find people who are willing to solve the problem. So Dr. Erich is graduated in IT and also he's a prosecutor. He knows about the hardship of regulating a farm, all the costs, the deadlines. So he told us, let's try and find technological solutions. So Dr. Erich, you could talk about that, right? You're going to explain it better. Thank you, Caio. Good afternoon. My name is Erich Masson. I'm the federal prosecutor in Mato Grosso, and I work in the electoral uh, prosecution as well, with a lot of work, and also with the environmental issues in Mato Grosso. And among the projects that the federal prosecution has, we have this legal meat project that is started in 2012 with conduct adjustment terms, an agreement that the refrigerating and meat packing industries established with the federal prosecutors to, and they agree to have this analysis on all the purchases. So when the meat packing is going to buy cattle from this industry, they have to inspect if they have environmental issues, if they have invasions on indigenous land, if there's a conflict in that area, if they were convicted due to slave-like labor, and they must have the car, the register as well, otherwise they won't be able to sell to the meat packing industry. So after 10 years of project, the state of Mato Grosso, we have 80% of the slaughter within this program of legal meat. So the meat packing companies have signed, most of them have signed this agreement. And our objective is to reach 100%. The meat packing companies themselves, they question us because they say the rule should be the same for everyone. Because the rule now for the market is not the sale purchase value. I have to guarantee that the meat that is being sold to the consumer has an environmentally correct origin. So our objective in this project in Mato Grosso is to reach 100% of meat packing industry signing the contract. So you see that the bar is high. There's no other market in Brazil with this kind of barrier, only the meat market. What about the cattle raisers with environmental issues? Are they going to be excluded from the market forever? No, that couldn't happen because at the end of the day, we are going to create this illegal market and we don't want that. And we have another potential here, right, Richard? That is the recovery of degraded areas because 98% of the meat packing blockings, the main reason is deforestation. Deforestation. If the main reason is deforestation, the recovery of the degraded areas according to the forest code allows the individual to sell again. So let's look for partners, and then that's what happened with IMAC. We created this project that that is called PREM, that is the reinsertion of that cattle raiser that is out of the market.
Slide, né? Porque a gente já viu que não adianta. Bom, se a
We
gente
saw that if we reinserted that fridge, if they are recovering the area, we can advance more. We can get to the total environmental regularization. The cattle raisers are in the state of Mato Grosso, a very big state in Brazil. The size of Mato Grosso is huge, so we have to use technological tools. And they have to be simple. It has to be a tool that anybody can use, as everybody uses Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. It is a simple tool, and how this project was designed. I have a problem. I cannot sell to Caio's fridge. So I enter the platform, I register my property, I put the information of my property, which is the CAR, the ID of each property, and the platform tells you you have such and such problems that prevent you from commercializing to that fridge. Let's say it's an environmental problem. So you will have to recover this area. And after the environmental diagnosis, they recover the area, they demonstrate they recover the area with satellite images. How they will prove that they have isolated the area? They will take georeferenced photos. Every cell phone has GPS today, so with the application, they will prove that they are recovering the area. The system will demand photos and evidence that they are recovering the area. The app was created by environmental engineers, so they will recover the area with monitoring via satellite. That may be the most expensive part of an environmental monitoring system in any part of the world. It is very expensive to do the monitoring of an environmental system. So to remove the cost of all of this, the analysis can be done via satellite images. With the satellite images, you can identify what is the degree of recovery of an area. So the system can do all of that with a very cheap cost. It was 1,000 and something reais for 5 years. It is a meaningless cost for the type of service that is executed. So after the term of commitment, they receive a certification, the temporary ACT, the commercialization authorization, that they can demonstrate to the fridge that they are recovering the deforested or degraded area, that the degraded area is no longer under production, and the cattle raiser can resume their commercialization with the fridge. So we will reinsert the cattle raiser that was in the margin of the market, both economic and environmental issues that were solved. That was an area that was responsible for a huge amount of carbon sequestration when the trees are growing. When we have to do a supervision or send information from the area, if the area is in fact being recovered, the cattle raiser is going to send georeference photos that the app has requested. So you can see that we reached this point. We are advancing towards specific treatment lines with SEMA so that the cattle raiser can have their CAR analyzed and the Secretariat of Environment can understand that they started their recovery. That will guarantee traceability because all cattle raisers that are in this project, they are being monitored as well. So traceability can be guaranteed since the fridges do direct analysis of the slaughters. I think, Caio, are you going to talk about traceability? I can talk about traceability. We can find also a solution for the indirect suppliers because within the platform, the fridges are going to require this whole registration of all of the farms that are part of that supply chain. So the direct supplier, for example, Caio's farm sells to JBS. Now Caio's farm is going to demand that the previous cattle raiser forwards the data. Now we're going to do this whole cycle until the birth of that cattle. And if within this chain there's a supplier with environmental problems, they can be reinserted through this other system. So we bring the inclusion of the cattle raisers that are outside the market, and we can guarantee the traceability of the cattle. Thank you very much. Very nice. The ACT, the temporary authorization for commercialization, is within the green passport. We are going to grant the authorization so that the meat can get to any market. We want to have this dynamics so that 100% of the meat that is bred in Mato Grosso can have the green passport. This is an example of stakeholder mobilization. We saw the pressure on the governor in the last COP, and this is partially mobilized. 80% of the slaughters are certified. Now we want to see where this cattle is born, if these areas had deforestation. We're going to mobilize with SEMA, with the public prosecution, and with CRIMATE, the Association of Cattle Raisers. With the direct cattle raisers, we don't have these problems, but sometimes the cattle is in small properties where the regularization is more complex. Sometimes they're in settlements. So there's this big fear of requiring the traceability of the cattle and blocking the chain. There's this fear of blocking the chain, especially because of the delay in environmental regularization. So we have to find solutions. That's why it's important to be here around the same table working together, a work group for traceability, IMAC, the Public Prosecution's Office, SEMA, CRIMATE, and PCI, because there's this problem with the indirect supply. What is the resistance from the cattle raisers? It's legitimate. If the registration is analyzed and approved fast, there's no problem. The use of GTA, the animal transfer document that is used if in a campaign for the eradication of foot and mouth disease in Brazil, through the GTA, they can see where this cattle went through to eradicate the outbreaks. So there's sometimes there's a fear of losing this sanitary eradication. We want to be aligned with everyone. We want to do this out of love, not out of pain. So we want to show that Mato Grosso is moving towards legality. We want to fulfill the law. We don't want any fines for the fridges that are not within legislation. We want to give deadline for the cattle raisers to be in compliance. The cattle raisers are very prepared to be in this debate with us. We had this debate with the cattle raisers, and now we are having this debate with the small fridges. Now I want to invite Richard from IPAM. We already had some stages done. IPAM is an institution that I admire very much. We had partnerships with IPAM since 2010. It is a very pragmatic NGO that supports serious research. They have a very technical research body. They don't have defamatory campaigns. They help us solve the problem. They were the ideal partner that we got to give visibility to our actions, to advance in these two work streams here, environmental regularization and traceability, and they also joined in the work stream of economic instruments, which is also a way to do things out of love. We don't want to criminalize anyone. We want to pay for the environmental services. So Richard is going to talk about the Conserve project, and now he is joining IMAC. Thank you, Caio. Thank you, Secretary Mauro. Thank you, Paula, Bruno. Thank you, IMAC's team. My name is Richard Smith. I represent the Institute of Research of the Amazon. We work in the Amazon and Cerrado in the whole legal Amazon area, and our intent is to work with scientific research, subsidizing public policies and pilot projects, what we call territorial development. For us, it's a joy to be here starting this partnership with IMAC and the other partners. We understand that the cattle raising chain has a responsibility for the conversion, for the emissions, and there is a potential for reducing those emissions as well. As Caio said, we have agendas with common objectives. When we talk about environmental regularization, which is an agenda led by SEMA and the state of Mato Grosso, IPAM has a lot to contribute in this agenda as well through restoration projects, technical subsidies where we assist SEMA to accelerate the validation of CAR, and through aid and capacity building of producers, unions, and city halls, and in this floor work, this groundwork. We usually say that IPAM has their shoes in the farms and their head in the world. We work in the COPs, but we work with the producers and with the city halls as well. So the agenda of environmental production is an agenda of consensus. In the agenda of economic instruments, we work in the project Conserve, And in traceability, we have a database to contribute and to assist in this traceability, as Dr. Erich was talking about. This traceability should be inclusive. Talking about economic instruments, probably the most pragmatic agenda that we have in Mato Grosso is the Project Conserve. The Project Conserve remunerates forest assets in the Amazon biome or in the Cerrado biome, those producers that have vegetation above the forest code. In Cerrado, 35%, and in the Amazon, 25%. If the vegetation is above what the law requires, we are able to remunerate them. And the result of this, in partnership with OGO, a research institute, and EDF, we can prove that there are producers that have forest assets and that are willing to deforest less to receive economic instruments. These are properties that maintain their production in cattle raising and soy and cotton. They have a profitable production, but they recognize the importance of those forests for the maintenance of climate, the water security, pollination, and all services that forest provides in terms of maintaining the productivity of cattle raising, crops of soy, corn, cotton, and all commodities that are produced in Mato Grosso. Besides Conserve, we have the mechanism of payment for environmental services. IPAM assisted the lower house through the coalition, which is an initiative of Brazil, and we have several potentials for remuneration for these forest services. We have a market of payment for forest services to be developed at the state level, and we have several initiatives like the municipality of Tangará da Serra, where we have a fund and a fee in the water bill that contributes for this fund to remunerate producers that conserve the springs of the basin. It is a huge potential, a consensus between the civil society as a whole and the production sector and the public power. Thank you very much, and I'm very happy with this partnership. I pass the floor to Caio again.
Então, eu fico olhando para a cara deles para ver se é a hora de mudar de slide, eu vou aqui e aviso ela. Então, eu vi que eu mudei um pouco antes, que o IPAM entrou.
I don't have the clicker here, but with the help of IMAC, the public prosecution, IPAM, we are going to have a simplified analysis, and the Secretariat of Environment, we are going to help the traceability with the private traceability. And besides, we are going to have this model for environmental services so that we can study the tax that could leave the collection at the state. What about the state? In the long run, the state is not collecting forever. So this is something that is working, Conserve. We have partnership with in Araguaia working, but concerning the taxes, it's also a challenge that we decided to work with. But Richard was talking about consensus. Some things we are going to fight forever. Those people could fight for several reasons, but everything that we are doing here is based on a consensus with all the stakeholders. So we are coming to the end. I'm going to call Paula Queiroz, our executive director, who is responsible with Bruno and I for the implementation in these 2 years and also the next steps. And I'd like to call her to finalize the presentation. Thank you, Caio. Just to end the presentation, we have a summary of what the Green Passport is. It's a great umbrella of all the projects that IMAC has built over these 2 years to include, mainly to include, thinking about this inclusion process and solution process as well. IMAC is a great solution table. We are not there to discuss, we are there to solve the problems. And from based on this assumption and also using the industry goals, we intend to achieve the following goals in 2025. 100% of the bovine processing industry inserted in the green market. As Caio and Erich mentioned, we are among 80%. 20% are lacking. So let's end the direct ones to advance in the next stage. To advance in the simplified analysis of the register, the rural register, and with the Secretariat of Environment, starting the traceability in an inclusive way, and 1/3 of the beef up to 30 months. So I thank you for the participation and your attention. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, all the members of the panel. Have a good afternoon and a good COP27 for all.